Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bre, where we are talking about all of the topics that help us have breakthroughs on our spiritual and personal development. My name is Bre, otherwise known as Healing with Bre, on social media and on my website. And I am a Akashic Records Channeler. I'm an energy healer, astrologer, tarot reader, and my most favorite thing that I do is soul alignment coaching. I'm about to come out with a group program where I'm helping perfectionists turned spiritual girlies, high performers turned spiritual people, right? I'm going to do a group program that's going to help teach us how to dissolve the inner critic, to release the internal pressure valve, to finally step into a feeling of peace and ease. And like we don't have to do it all, which is really fear and scarcity mindset. This is going to be really cool. It's going to manifest in you being able to be more present and patient with people in your life. If you find yourself being a little tense or snappy or not having as much capacity for your loved one, for your kids, if you find yourself in really deep self-sabotaging cycles, like with things that you're trying to accomplish and grow, things that you're trying to manifest, this is absolutely going to teach you how to dissolve those so that you can actually be open and creating some of those things that you want. In addition to that, if you find yourself kind of being in this like hot cold relationship with your emotions, like you're not quite sure how to process some of the big ones that you feel or process some bad like history, trauma, maybe inner child stuff. And that's creating this sort of like, again, the pressure valve, right? Like you're bottling it up, you're feeling tense, and it comes out in a big wave, and you want to learn how to address it and really nurture it in any given moment and not have it throw off your whole day. This program's also going to give you the tools to do that. So by the end of it, you're going to be able to really tap into a feeling of flow, feeling of ease, a feeling of freedom, so that you can maximize what you feel like your full potential is in this life. So if you're trying to master your flow, trying to master your ease, I highly recommend that you sign up for my email list. Of course, I'm going to talk about it more in here, so keep listening. But if you want to be the first to hear about the program, there are going to be limited spots for this one. And because it's my first time doing this program, it's going to be at a really, really stellar price, limited group of people. Sign up for the email list, link in bio to hear more about that. I have my one-on-one coaching outside of that. If you want more intensive work on a long-term program, or maybe you want a little TLC in one session, all of that is on my website, healingwithbre.net. On today's episode, we have the most beautiful conversation for you. It is about death and grief, but what it's really about is life and love. So one of the things that we talk about in this episode is how one thing actually is how you experience and understand its opposite. It's kind of like a high level thing, but really, death is what shows us the truth about life. And that grief and loss shows us, and we really feel the truth about what it really means to love. And who doesn't want to understand how to live and love more vibrantly and fully and truly? So I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. The other thing I'll say about this is that this episode is not only for people who have perhaps lost loved ones, this is for people who are trying to navigate life, because grief and death are a part of our everyday in ways that you might not have ever really thought about. So I highly recommend that anybody and everybody listen to this episode. Please share this episode with people that you think would really benefit from it. And please remember to like and subscribe to the episode while you're at it on the page. And with all of that, let's get into the episode. Okay, everybody, I am so excited to introduce to you today somebody who I've met, who I've known kind of tangentially over the years and admired from afar. We have Hemali Vora on, who is a holistic practitioner and physical therapist, Akashic Records Channeler, Reiki Master, author, and Death Doula. Welcome to the podcast, Hemali.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Me too. Me too. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. Before we get into all of the juicy topics, all of the wonderful information that wants to flow through you and us and in this conversation, I want to give our listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit. So I have questions that I ask all of my guests, and we'll start with those. First of all, please share with us your pronouns and where you're located in the world. And then we'll go into some of the fun stuff like maybe astrology and human design and so
Yeah.
on.
I'm located in Maryland, so East Coast. Um, and uh, she, her, and
Mm.
my human design. I am generator. I'm a Capricorn, so my sun sign is Capricorn, but I'm at cusp of Aquarius and Capricorn, and um, rising is Aries, and moon is Leo, and this is Western astrology.
I have a lot of Leos in my life. I'm a Leo Venus myself. And some people I think are surprised when they hear and meet that people are introverted as Leos. I'm like, it's 100% a thing. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but if you are, what Hogwarts house would you be?
So I actually, before I got on, my son is like, I asked him, right, because I haven't read the books, and so um, we were looking through the characteristic,
Yeah.
and is it a Hufflepuffle or
Uh-huh.
something? Yeah.
Hufflepuff. Yeah.
So apparently that maybe, I mean, some briefly we kind of went through
Yeah.
some of the houses, and he's like, maybe you can fit in here.
Yeah.
You know how teenagers are and how he sees me, I guess.
Yeah. What a fun little bonding moment with your son.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Hufflepuff too, so you're in good
Okay.
you're in good company. Don't worry. Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit about your story. Whatever you feel like you'd like to share about, a little bit of maybe your background that teed you up for doing this kind of work. How I think you mentioned that you started in physical therapy and then came into some of the modalities that you work with now. If you want to like, kind of share the short story of kind of
Sure.
how that came to fit together, which I know is so hard because our story
Right?
is so
It's
intricate
like,
and all the parts are so important,
yeah,
but
how do you put like 51 years of
yeah.
stories into, right, in like 2 minutes? But physical therapy, yeah, I graduated in 2000. So even before that, when I was in school, when we practiced on each other, and also internships, right? And so I remember at one point when we were doing massage and everything, I felt like heat in my hands. Um, but when I was doing internship at an outpatient clinic, and I was in Florida, and so these ladies used to come for fibromyalgia. And at the time, fibromyalgia was considered as a psychological issue and not so much as, physical. And so that's how they would look at. But every time they would come, I would know exactly where they were hurting, and I was able to heal them. And so then they started asking for me and coming, making appointment with me. And so I knew of Reiki because one of my grandmother's neighbor in India um, did Reiki. And so, um, I felt like I needed to learn um, Reiki. And there's something in my hand, I would say. I don't know what it is. It's heating up. And, um, but this was in like 1998. And then moving forward, I didn't certify until 2014. It took me that long. But I think the whole process was when my dad passed away in 2010. Um, I went into this existential crisis and really looking at death and what my life is, what my legacy is. Watching my dad was 2 when both his parents died. And so even somebody that had just minimal high school education, maybe 1 year in college, and um, and not rich or anything, like he built himself up, but yet when we had prayers for him, there were like more than 100 people. This is in India, and we were watching and on Skype, and people talking about how he made a difference in their life, maybe got them a job or got them significant other, like college degree, all those things, like helping them out. And it's like, that was his legacy. What would my legacy be? What is my purpose in this lifetime? And so really I started really going deep into death. What is death? And this whole circle of life, I realized that there's circle of life, and there's just, you go, if you believe in it, right? It's continuous process. you know, birth and death and birth and death. And I was like, oh my God, I want out. So I am looking for something that I want out. And so I'm Hindu by background. I was born in India. I did my high school in India, but I came here when I was 18. So I know these prayers, some of these chants and prayers, mantras that I started singing to take me out of this loop. Is like, whatever it is, I'm telling you right now, listen to me. If this is when I proclaim that I want out of this cycle. But the more I started doing that, I started becoming very curious about things. You know, I did a holistic nutrition while I did Reiki. And just continuously, life was progressing. I was more, really, my life was upside down. You know, when you ask for something, it's like you feel your life is, there are so many bottoms that you experience. So anyway, that's how I came about doing. And then some of my intuitive, like meditation, intuitive dreams that led me to end of life doula, which I had no idea about it until I was in this process of, I want to know who my guide is, this is like 20, for at least 6 to 8 months, every day in my meditation. That was my intention. I want to know, I want you to come and talk to me. And so one night I wake up and I see this dark figure, but it scares me, but I knew that it wasn't scary.
Yeah.
But that's it, right? It was gone. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. Just tell me who you are. And the answer was, I'm Angel of Death. My first paper that I wrote when I came here and I joined college in English 101 was on euthanasia. And I had never heard about euthanasia. And so it's like little by little, and it's like, even as young adult, I used to say, I've said it a few times, that there's something about death and me, and I don't know what it is. So it's just, yeah, it's like that whole circle. And then to come back to, my dad's parents died when he was 2. My mom's dad died when she was very young. And so their journey, when my siblings were born, their whole focus was, if something happened to them, to make me, because I'm the older one, make me as independent that I am able to take care of my siblings if anything happens to them. So again, that fear of death, of fear of when they're gone, what will happen to their kids?
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's their experience.
Yeah.
And so to go back to that, like when I was born, you know, it goes that deep.
Yeah.
So yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting to observe people who find, whether you want to call it a job or,
Yeah.
purpose, and they're able to look back at their life and see all the little, like the little Easter eggs that were, hidden
Exactly.
along the way,
Puzzle
or like the
pieces.
little,
Yeah.
yes, the little seeds that were planted that, like, in the moment you would never know that might be
Exactly.
connected to something you would do.
Yeah.
But when you come into that, you say, oh wait, like that experience has a
Yeah.
direct line to preparing me for what I'm doing now. And I've experienced so many of those. And
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting for you, especially because it was something you kind of resisted, which on
Yeah.
some level I feel like we all do a little bit. We all
Yeah.
have that point of kind of like resisting,
Yeah.
but also being so pulled into like what we're meant to do, and being like,
Right.
gosh, like this theme has actually echoed through my whole life, my
Yeah,
whole
exactly.
life.
Yeah. And my last draw was, my daughter and I went to see a medium. And just 15 minutes, and we were just laughing and joking about it. Nothing, but what she had told me was that my dad had this job, so to speak, in the once he had transitioned, where he was receiving people
Oh, wow.
from when they were transitioning, And then he was directing them where they need to go. And that sounds so much like him, you know? And I was like, I could agree. I was like, yeah, it sounds like him, you know? That's a
But that's
perfect judgment.
incredible that you guys are like on either end of it. Like you're guiding people
Exactly.
over and he's receiving them.
E-
You're like tossing the
Exactly.
ball. Like, okay, it's over to you,
Exactly.
Dad, you
And
know?
so that was like, all right, fine, fine. I hear you. I will do it. It was very hard for me because um to read these books, to watch these videos of people pass, I'm like, I couldn't even get through first paragraph of a chapter. I'm bawling.
Yeah.
It was hard course, but I think what I got out of that is two things. I just need to openly talk about death, um, and explaining to people. And then second thing was legacy. Legacy doesn't mean property. Legacy doesn't mean that you need to have a big organization. It doesn't mean that you have to do something big. A smile is your legacy. A hug is your legacy. Your children are your legacy.
Yeah.
It's just that love. That's something that you share with others is your time, your just being
Yeah.
is your legacy. And it's like, we don't realize that.
Yeah. Well, as people will know, because they've probably clicked the episode and it has a title on it, really what we're going to talk about today in the main segment in a minute is death and grief, right?
Yeah.
And just to close out this segment, because I feel like this story like really ties into what you were just saying, is that like the impact that we make on other people is so much more profound and kind of like not big, it's like big in the impact, but it's not big in its motion. One of the most moving Akashic Record sessions that I have had the honor of doing was with a widow, and she
Mm,
was really, really grappling with her grief process. She had
mm,
been with her husband for decades,
mm,
and they were very, very close. And she was like, I don't want to let him go. Like people are saying I have to, let him go, and I don't, like, why would I want to do that? I don't want to do that. I feel stuck, all this kind of stuff. And the Akashic Records keepers led us through this beautiful kind of like arc where they demonstrated to her through what they were asking and sort of prompting, that the love that she had shared with her husband had changed her. Like she was different because of the love that they had. Like her own essence had changed.
yeah.
The imprint of him could never leave her. It could never leave her. It, like, our love that we have for people, I'm gonna get emotional. It changes you.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
changes you like your deepest essence.
Yeah.
And love can be in the smallest of gestures, like you giving a genuine smile to
Yeah.
somebody that really needs to receive that changes them, even if it's in the smallest ways.
Absolutely.
The kindness that you extend a coworker or a family member or
Yeah.
a friend, the way you love your children, like
Hmm.
that creates such a profound change in people that is everlasting. Like truly it is unchanging in the sense that like it can't be removed.
Yeah.
So I think that that's so beautiful to talk about, like legacy as like as something that you really thought about coming into your work,
Yeah.
kind of being a bestie to death.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
some things to understand about that is that honestly, I think it's impossible to leave without a legacy, because
Exactly.
love is like human nature, and like what, like, to the extent, of course, is going to be different on what our intention is, but it's kind of
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
escape it, and you also can't escape the way that love impacts you. So I just wanted to share that before we get
Yeah.
into our main stuff.
Beautifully summarized. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. We're gonna go collect ourselves, everybody. We're gonna mop our eyes before we probably go into a segment that gets us.
Issue. Ooh, paper with us. Yes.
Here we go. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, we are back. We've collected ourselves. We're also talking about how we feel the presence of certain guides. We're feeling some energy. If you're feeling that too, just take a deep breath, welcome it in, It's all here to support us. But the way I like to start some of these segments about these big topics is kind of like, okay, like what is it we're talking about? What's the definition? How do we understand it? And then sort of like move through the topic and how we relate to it and how it comes into our lives. So, two different topics we're kind of talking about here. One is the concept of death. And I know that this is like a concept that you spent a lot of time grappling with and trying to come to an understanding that you could feel at peace with, right? So I'd love to hear your take. And I know that, of course, that's a big thing. You wrote a whole book on it, but like, your understanding of like what death really is. And I'd also like your take on what you think grief really is. Like, how do you understand these two topics?
Hmm. Um, well, death, I've explored it since 2010, really dived deep into it, but that's what's taught me what life is, what little
Mm,
miracles and magic in every moment is.
mm,
That curiosity has taken me to where I am right now.
mm,
Um, the more and more I think, even in the end of life doula work, what my role so far is energy work.
mm,
And so it's almost like not almost, it is a soul to soul conversation
mm,
uh, with the person that is at the end stage, whether they're conscious or not, whether they're present here um, or not. Sorry, there's a cat right outside my window. And so whether they are in person, and most of my work has been actually virtual. Families have called me um, and asked me, so they would send me their picture, the full name, and then I do a session with them, and I am able to channel or speak with them. Um, and many people that do this energy work with the end of life people that are transitioning is that they see this space that is um, like this waiting space almost.
mm,
It's dark, but not dark that we think like black it is. But they're just waiting, they're sitting, and they're deciding whether they're coming or going. And so more of putting them in ease. So the death that I talk about, I have done the more and more I uh, started researching on death and this whole cycle of life and death. Go back to where you came from, and it's like go back to the Vedic, the Hindu, um, and really it's Sanatan, right? Hindu, it's a Western term. Really, it's Sanatan Dharma, meaning way of life.
mm,
So the scripture of which is Bhagavad Gita, basically that's what it talks about: death and dying. And what it talks about really is that you have never been born, so you will never die.
mm,
So there is no birth. So then there is not going to be death. And I will tell you what that means. Is like one of the verse that talks about that who you really are. What is your essence, your soul, your muse, whatever you call it, that higher self, is that when we come into that baby body, right? We're birthing, we come into this um, planet in that baby form. And then we, grow to be adolescent and then toddler, adolescent, teenager, adult, and elderly. We're changing bodies constantly.
mm,
We're dying constantly. And then, even elderly, it's like we're just shifting to another body. We're transitioning to another body. Similarly, we transition into this baby's body.
mhm,
And so that's not, so it's like it's a cycle. And it's constant. That change is constant.
mhm,
And we think, yes, our bodies are mortal, but we are immortal.
mhm. Yeah.
And it's like, so you can, so that brought comfort to me.
Mhm.
And there's so many verses that you um, fire cannot burn you, and knife cannot cut you. I mean, there are so many verses that if you look at, talks about that, talks about that whole concept of trying to explain one simple thing: who
Mhm.
your higher self is, what your soul is, who that I am is,
Yeah.
and what does really death mean.
Yeah.
And another way that, I used to always look at birth and death, I used to look at sunrise and sunset, and I say this a lot, but, sunrise, I felt like it's birth, right? Like when somebody's born, you see sunrise and you see these beautiful colors all around. It's like you're celebrating, right? That awakening, you're celebrating. Similarly, when you're born, everybody's celebrating, and we've had so many, we know that we are always received. We have loved ones waiting for us. We have angels, guides. Everybody's really clapping for well done, job well done on this planet. Whatever
Mhm.
you went through, and
Mhm.
they're receiving you. That's like sunset to me. We have same concept, but isn't that an illusion being on planet? There is no sunrise and sunset. It's the earth is moving. Sun is right there. Our soul is there.
Mhm.
It's the earth that's moving. It's giving us this illusion that there is sunrise and sunset.
Mm.
And so same thing. It's like that birth and death cycle. It's like it's an illusion.
100%. Gosh, there's so much like wisdom and goodness in this, and I love it. Before this, I was just listening to Wayne Dyer, and he was talking about how we are infinite. And
Yeah,
it's when we don't understand our infinite nature, which is our soul,
right.
that is exactly when all of the things that trip us up. You
Mm,
know, like that's when we start to really have anguish about things, is when we don't understand the unlimited nature of what we really are, right? And I
yeah,
think what you said is so beautiful. Like, when we understand that we are unlimited and therefore like we cannot die,
yeah,
the way that we look at this experience on earth is so different, right? It's when we over identify with the human experience, when we think what we are is this human body, is the
yeah,
ego mind that's gifted to us through the body and its capabilities, which is beautiful. It enables really cool experiences. But it's when we think that is where it ends, that's where our limit is,
yeah.
that we incur a lot of fear and anxiety about this. When the
That's
truth,
attachment, right?
yes, attachment 100%, when we're really attached, and really attachment, and it's so crazy you say this, because the root of attachment is fear, and the
Mhm.
fear is that we're limited, right? Like the fear is that there's a limited amount of something, that there's scarcity, scarcity mindset in that, right? It's when we are in that energy, when we're in that belief, when we're looking at the world through that lens, that we clench, we hold on, and we're afraid. But again, when we ask to really understand and feel the truth of our unlimited, infinite nature,
Mhm.
right? Of our soul nature, we see that we could never end. Our experience will change. We're not going to be like tethered to just seeing things through our mind and our body. We're going to be
Yeah,
unleashed into the whole experience of the soul and of whatever that it looks like when we're not in a body. But like really, there is no ending. There is no death for something that is infinite in
exactly.
nature, you
Yeah,
know?
it's ongoing. And so the whole point to I want out.
Yeah. They're like, that's funny. That's funny.
Exactly.
That's a funny
Well,
joke.
right? But the whole point is that what I was shown was, again, meditation, and through these Bhagavad Gita verses, is that I am able to experience freedom by just closing my eyes. I'm able to experience that liberation, moksha, by
Hmm.
just in any moment, whether I close my eyes or not, I can be free.
Hmm.
I can be liberated.
Hmm.
It's again our minds playing tricks with us, right?
Yeah.
We're like so attached to concepts, beliefs, body
Identities.
yes, and labels, and
And
People
even experiences and memories. Yeah, we're very attached. Uh-huh.
everything, right?
Hmm.
And it's and nothing wrong or right. And that's the one thing that I have learned is, um, by saying that this is how everything is, or this is the only path, or this, it's like we all want to reach that one goal,
Hmm.
that self-realization.
Hmm.
And there are billions of paths. Like
Hmm.
how many people we are all uniquely guided. We all have our own paths
Yeah.
to that one place.
Yeah.
Nothing is wrong or right. Nothing is right, good or bad.
Yeah.
It just is. And it's that going into, so that also gives more perspective on the duality and non-duality,
Hmm.
these verses. So really studying into the Bhagavad Gita also brought me more peace.
Well, I would love to talk a little bit now about the concept of grief. And I think we've teed this up beautifully, right? Talking about death as this transition. And I love what you said about the fact that our bodies are constantly dying because in order to change, they have to die. And this reminds me too, one of the people I've had on the podcast, we've had Anne on the podcast. So if people haven't listened to that episode, please go back. Also had Megan Zuzovich, and she said, she was in a meditation and she was contemplating the concept of creation. And what came to her in that was that creation is impossible without destruction. Like
Yeah.
life is impossible without death. So we're constantly in a death process. In order for change to happen, something's got to die. Our bodies are constantly dying. Yet somehow, when we reach that point of death and the trend, what the new looks like is something different that's not necessarily, in this incarnation and body is when we start to get a little bit of anxiety about it. And also when we would experience what we would call grief, right? I would love for your take on your understanding of what grief really is and maybe why people can really deeply struggle with that experience when death and transition happens in their life with their loved ones.
Yes, I think that, I've really struggled through that myself. My dad passed away in 2010. I didn't start grieving him until 2016,
Mm.
really. And um, really, this whole one meditation, I'm just like bawling. That 1 hour, 1.5 hour that I was in that, it's like I'm just letting go.
Mhm.
And so 6 years it took me to get there. Um, so there is no time that this is where you need to start, this is where you need to end. You're going to love this person, the loved one that went past, pets, whoever, until the last breath you take,
Mhm.
so there is no start, beginning, or ending of it. And it hits you in bouts.
Mhm.
You go through this struggle, and the closer you are to the person that passed away, the deeper your grief is going to be. And not everybody's going to understand what you're going through. Because if they haven't experienced that, and that is the worst part. Because first of all, we're not set up like the society is not set up to grieve.
Mhm.
3 days, 4 days,
Yeah.
uh, in India you have 13 days. There are many cultures that have these days set, where some pray every single day, um, um, for better transition for the person, because again the soul, it lingers for at least 10 to some days, and so because sometimes, depending, if it's a quick death or a sudden death, they're still trying to grapple what just happened. And so they're
Mhm.
like, wait, what's happening? Where am I?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but somebody that is already knows and they're transitioning, it's still hard. Um, and so, anyway, so you're praying, you're doing this, but we are not set like, then we right away start, um, dive into taking care of the property or whatever the person left behind,
Mhm.
all the things you have to go through. And so you're not really sitting down and grieving this person. you don't have the time. And so we have to now think and proactively start working on reducing the clutter we have, the things that we possess,
Mhm.
making sure that everything is set up in a way that the loved ones can actually sit and are able to sit and grieve and not take care of bank accounts, and even banks and everything are not set up for that. I
Mhm.
tell you, how many times do you change your I've gone and we've changed my dad's name or taken his name out with taking death certificate, and you do even phone bills and things. It's like, until now, the name is still there. They
Mhm.
haven't taken it out, and we were like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. And so, but grief is, anybody mentions, it depends. Everybody grieves differently. Some people like to mourn for a longer period of time, a year. Um, some people like to celebrate the life that was here, even short time, but what they've taught and the love that they have shared. Um, but grief, I feel like it's that deep pain that you have, that missing of that touch,
Mhm.
that hearing of the voice. So it's all senses
Yeah.
that we're not able to see them
Yeah.
physically. We're
Yeah.
not able to hear them um, in this plane, and we're not able to touch them, hold them, um, love, bicker with them, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I think so. It's more like that senses
Yep.
that it's taken away. And so that detachment is very hard. And so we like to hold on to that.
Mhm.
Um, Again, it's not wrong or right. It's not good or bad. Allow that process to happen.
Mhm.
Sit and cry, sob. I've done that, just like sobbed and ugly
Yeah.
sobs,
Yeah.
Um, I've had insomnia, depression, all those things. It's like trying to figure life out because now the veil is thin. And so you are in this contemplation again, that this is an opportunity
Mhm.
for you to see
Mhm.
what life is and what death is.
Mhm. 100%.
And it shows you that it's an opportunity we are here for limited time to see that our bodies are made up of bacterias and viruses, and they're gonna rot at certain point. I mean, I'm putting it out there grossly, but it is the truth.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and really, I think that uh, don't let anyone tell you that this is the wrong way to grieve, or even that grief process. You have that anger, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't go in that numbers. Okay, your ticking mark. Okay, I
It's
was
not linear like this, like we wish it would be. Yeah.
done, and it's
Yeah.
done. Once we're accepting it, it's done. No, it doesn't work that way. And it's like, um celebrate when their death anniversaries, celebrate their birthdays, whatever they love doing. um
Yeah.
it- it's bringing that back and talk openly with the kids,
Mhm.
talk openly with each other. I know the way we grieved, we individually grieved, like my siblings and my mom. Like, what if they're not thinking about it? And then I come in and I tell them that this is what I'm going through, and then they're going to be sad. And so you don't want that to happen to them.
Mm.
So you don't talk about it. And
Mhm.
so we all individually grieved on our own.
Yeah.
But it's good to come together in community and grieve
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And
It's very healing.
yeah, crying, hugging, whatever it is that brings that peace to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that one of these other things that I wanted to talk with you about is the purpose that grief can offer us.
Mm,
And one of the things that I've heard you say a lot through this, which is one of my favorite things to contemplate, is how like polar experience, how opposing things on a spectrum are really our way of understanding what's on it at all. And this is what I mean by this. So at the beginning, you said, in my study of what death is, really what I've learned is what life is, right? To learn one end of a spectrum is to learn its opposite because they're both of the same essence.
yeah.
And one of the most beautiful things, and I forget exactly where I heard this, this is kind of like an esoteric, concept, but like the whole purpose of coming and having a human experience is to be able to experience polarity. It's to be able to experience contrast,
Yeah.
right? It's to be able to experience sadness so you can understand happiness, right? To understand loss so that you can understand love, right? To understand pain so you can understand pleasure, right? Like it's only when we are able to experience wider and wider on that spectrum that we fully feel what we might call the like positive or more life-giving one too. Like that's what is required in order to have this sort of like mental, like embodied true understanding of something, right? And so what I'm hearing you say, and I'd love to hear you talk more about this, is that surrendering to the sadness, surrendering to the experience of loss, which isn't really a true loss, but it is like it is an experience of a type of loss, right? And to experience grief is also to let yourself experience love. It's to let yourself understand life, right? So it's not just like a bad, dark, scary thing. In fact, it's like the way that your whole world can be widened. Like your whole heart can be opened if we kind of stop resisting it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I love the way you summarize, but what while you were talking about that, what I was getting is that also, yes, that I always felt that, the dark and, the light and the sadness, the deep sadness and the deep joy. And then there's this gray spectrum. And it's not the thin, I used to always first feel like there's this thin line, and that's where I want to go. But it's not so thin, it's wide, where that, again, that duality and non-duality. It's
Mhm.
where, a lot of Buddhist monk also, it's like wind comes, like storms and tornadoes come, the tree that is really grounded on all these centered and balanced
Mhm.
in their emotions and everything. It's like the tree may sway. Yes, some branches may fall off, but yet it will come back to its position. And
Mhm.
so similarly, all these experiences, these are an opportunity
Mhm.
to go deeper inside ourselves and look at these deeper meaning or deeper understanding, consciousness, awareness
Mhm.
of what this is, what
Yeah.
the grief is, death is, life is.
Mhm.
Again, it's like everything, if you separate everything, that's when you find the struggle. But now, when you bring everything together, all these experiences, and that's when you feel that peace and balance.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know if I explained it right, but
No, I that metaphor of the tree and the roots is one of my favorites, which is why it's literally like in the logo of my business because I think that it's so true. The roots going down
yeah.
is like one of the most critical parts of there being any sort of existence or growth at all, right? And I'll have clients or I'll hear people in general say that they want that experience of grounding. They want that experience of feeling more centered in themselves, which is really also growing resiliency, right? Like growing a sense of energetic and emotional resiliency that they want that. They want to be more connected and solid, But sometimes what people don't realize is that it's the difficult experiences that they're resisting and that they're avoiding that's the way for them to grow the roots. Like that is the reason they're in in your life is because on some level they are trying to support you,
Yeah.
right? But when we're like, no, 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 get out of here. Like, I don't want that. I don't want that. Like the very thing that we're praying for, that we're asking for is what we're avoiding, right? And I think even in something as acute as grief, because I think it's one of the most acute examples of detachment, right? It's like one of the most acute experiences of like literally not being able to have the physical experience of something that we do feel attached to on some level, right? It's like through those things
Yeah.
that we find the deepest roots, that we find our greatest resiliency, that we find our greatest connection. So if you want to feel that, if you want to build that strength, you want to build those roots to go down, it's in these experiences that that happens, you know? Like hate to break it to you, but it is also in these experiences where that happens, you know?
And when you resist anything, even
Yeah.
like a little bit of that whole part,
Mhm.
it's like you're resisting the whole thing. And the
Yeah.
more you resist, the more it persists.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not able to move forward.
Yeah.
And I say that, but I am constantly stuck in because it's like when you learn all these things, when the veil is thin, you're aware of things. You're aware of sensations around you. You're aware of presence of the person you loved. You
Hmm.
may see or hear or feel, but you don't want to because you're scared.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh my God, it's spooky because the society has said that.
Conditioned. Yeah. Conditioned us for sure.
Exactly. Like these beliefs that are not yours, but you've heard them. And that's, you start believing those things.
Yeah, when in fact it's so natural. I think it's one of the most natural things that we can experience from our soul self is to experience the connection
Yeah.
with the love, with the energy that is not always physical, you know, like whether that's with our guides or our higher self or source or like particular loved ones. I think that's so natural and it's
Yeah.
so beautiful and we're doing it all the time whether we're aware of it or not, you know. So like to like kind of play this illusion on ourselves like, oh no, I don't want to connect with them, it will scare me, like you're already connected to them, what are you talking about, you know?
Exactly. And I'll tell you what I've heard, and that gave me also more peace is um, the more we heal ourselves here, it's like we not only heal ourselves, but we heal our ancestors, our generation above, before us, and then moving forward, our future generations.
Yeah.
And when I started doing this deeper work and healing myself and allowing, and when I'm saying that letting go of the energy of my dad doesn't mean that I'm letting him go, like he's never going to come to me, I'm not going to be able to communicate with him or anything. It's just that I'm allowing, freeing him from my attachment, from my, so that he can do the work that he needs to do
Hmm.
when he's not here.
Yeah.
You know, and if you believe in reincarnation, who knows? He may be reincarnated somewhere. But again, there is no past, present, future.
Hmm.
Everything is happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
So even we're living lifetimes right now as we speak in different, dimensions and things. So it's like, but yet you're just freeing them. And that doesn't mean that letting go word, sometimes it scares us. That letting go, it's like we want to hold on to everything. We want to hold on to ourselves too, right?
Hmm.
Our patterns, habits. We want to hold on to our bodies,
Yeah.
uh, people. So it's like it's okay to let them go, and doesn't mean that you are. It's that saying that when something, you allow that person to let go of that person, and if they're truly yours, they'll come back to you,
Yep.
kind of like that.
100%. Yeah, I think what you said was so beautiful. Letting go is really just about allowing.
Yeah.
And it's a freeing of both people because it feels like letting go is a form of resistance, right? To hold on. And I feel when we let go, what we find is actually how much, again, it's a part of us. Like
Mhm.
that you can't let go. You can't be rid of something that is you.
Yeah.
right? And your loved ones, hello, the word loved, like, right? Like the love connects you on like
Yeah.
a cellular level. Like you cannot be rid of something that is a part of you. So really what you're letting go of is more of an idea or a construct of what to experience that loved one is like, right?
Yeah.
It's an attachment that the way that this person exists to me is when I could see and touch and hug them.
Yeah.
But it's letting go of that type of experience with them so that you can really feel how deeply connected and a part of you they are,
Yeah.
and you can learn to experience them in a different way.
Absolutely. It's almost like, again, soul to soul, that higher being. So when you let go of that body or that person, the way they were on this planet, and the labels and identity they played around you,
Mhm.
when you let go of that and you see them as that higher being and that soul,
Mhm.
that's freeing for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's healing, like you said, it's like a ripple to
Yeah.
all the things that you're connected to, which spoiler alert is everyone and everything, but it's also your ancestors and your
Yeah.
future your future family and loved ones.
Yeah.
Um, my last question for you on this is, I what feels true to me is that when we experience the loss of a loved one, that kind of grief again is like so acute, it's so powerful, it's so intense, right? Which is why it has such an imprint on our experience as humans, and it's this big topic, right? I also feel like we experience grief and we experience death in a million ways all the time in all these different parts of life, right? So I feel what is so special about a topic like this or even an episode like this is that to become more familiar with this concept of death, to become more comfortable with it in a certain sense, and to start to learn how to allow the process of it is something that's going to serve us in our everyday life. Our everyday life. So I
Yeah.
wonder if you have some thoughts to share about how grief and how death is really a part of any and every human experience, and how we can take some of this wisdom that again you've learned in your experience with death into parts of our lives that seemingly don't have anything to do with it. I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Well, like you said, our body itself, right? Our cells are dying constantly.
Mhm.
They say that in 7 years, you have completely new cells, like your whole body is
Has
new,
renewed. Yeah.
right? And same thing, your relationship, your experiences, it's like relationships die, that grief or loss of old house, loss of your old self,
Hmm.
what you used to be, your, loss of 40s or 30s, the
Hmm.
age and loss of friendships, the way
Hmm.
that it used to be, that shift. So we are constantly grieving that.
Yeah.
And constantly, and that's where the struggle and that um, whole pain, the trauma that we sit in, because we're constantly going back into the past
Yeah.
and we are recreating those stories
Yep. Yep.
over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And it's like taking those stories and seeing it with a different light,
Yeah.
um, different lessons learned, and so all these grief and death, they combine like every single day we are experiencing little by little by little. They're
Mhm.
like this compound
Yeah.
griefs.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets way too much overwhelming
Yeah.
for one person to handle. Because if you're not sharing with someone, if you're bottling it in,
Yeah.
either it's going to explode like a pressure cooker,
Hmm.
um, or, in a different way,
Yeah.
in more of an anger, or fear can cause anger,
Yeah.
frustration, irritation. Um, and again, then you're going to shift with your words because you don't mean it when you're angry, but then you're going to create this again, that shift in experiences with the relationship.
Yeah.
And then there could be a death of a relationship right there again. So it
Totally.
piles again.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like like change is the only thing that's constant, right? They say that. And change is death. Change is the ending of something and the creation of something else, right? And it's so interesting to too, because with a lot of the clients that I work with, they have goals for things they want to create in their lives. They have things that they're trying to like aspire to, they're trying to get to, right? That whole process requires change, right? Like if it didn't, then you'd already have what you wanted, right? Like it would already exist, right? So there has to be some element of change, which means that if you want to get the things that you want, if you want to manifest the things you want, you kind of have to become a very graceful
Yeah.
person in death, in ending, in change, right? So I feel like it's an integral part of our whole experience. And there was another message. Thank you. Thank you guys. They were like, I could feel them in my ear, like say this part. Another thing that I work a lot with my one-on-one clients on in my coaching is exactly how to honor the feeling and the sadness and the grief of something while still letting it move. I feel like a lot of times we'll think about something that we feel really sad to have ended, or maybe it's, memories that have some sort of heaviness or trauma or something. And it can feel a little bit difficult when we've not seen an example of it or been taught how to truly honor it and appreciate it without that attached holding on to, because a lot of the ways that we're taught to love is via attachment, and it's
Yeah.
not really that divine love,
Yeah.
right? I like to think of that divine love as more of like an appreciation, which opens up and allows things as opposed to that love that like grabs onto things, right? So one of the things that I can feel my guides wanted me to mention is if you're in a situation and you can tell that there's some grief for something that's changed that needs to move through you, right? You're open to the concept, but you need to work through that grief for a minute. um what I help guide people through is being able to really bring up, maybe it's a version of yourself, maybe it's a set of circumstances, maybe it's a person, and really to genuinely find what you are appreciative to them for, how that moment in time, whether it's again it's a person or a collection of circumstances, ultimately served you, like ultimately helped you, right?
Yeah.
And feeling a deep sense of appreciation, right? And then we can also turn our eyes forward and know that more circumstances, more people, more things are coming to us to help us in the same way that that did, right?
Yeah.
And really, a function of the human mind I talk about all the time in my episodes and with my clients is survivability, which is known and familiar, right? That literally the probability of you going into an unknown circumstance has a higher probability of something happening to you, which could risk your survivability versus something that is familiar, right? That's the function of like the human reptilian brain that's trying to keep your physical body alive, right? When we know that our brain works like this, we can understand why it would feel more attached to memory, to
Mm.
past, than it would to future, right? But our soul, the wisdom that our soul knows, is that the future holds just as much, if not more, joy and more love and more success and more bliss and more abundance ahead of us. But it's when our brain kind of sneaks in and we're not realizing it's holding on to something from the past and memory instead of letting ourselves go into something new and be open, where we start to hold on, we start to resist, we start to do more of that attach kind of thing instead of the appreciate and allow. So I was feeling whatever it was to talk about that for people in case
Yeah,
that's
things
helpful.
coming. And I love the word movement. I
Hmm.
think we need that movement. And again, that creation that you talk about, you need space to create something new. So
Yeah.
something needs to leave for
Yeah.
you to create that space to come in. And that movement, we need that movement. Anything that is stale, the energy, the stuck, the body, everything, it's going to attract illness. And, and
Mm,
it could be mental illness, physical illness,
mhm.
spiritual illness, all that is
Yeah.
wrapped. Another thing that kept coming up is not every relationships are loving, and not every relationship are has good endings in terms of somebody that may have caused you great pain and trauma.
Hmm.
But again, that going back to what are the lessons that you've learned and how you have changed and shifted, taking
Hmm.
that opportunity with that pain.
Yeah.
Be it your parent that has caused you deep suffering and pain,
Yeah.
trauma, be it anyone, and you're still trying to grapple or figure out, like, now I lost my chance to tell them
Mm.
what I wanted to say. I should have told them, you know, and it's that comes up a lot. And it's like, you can still tell them. I know you want to tell them when they were physically there, but you didn't have the strength and to say that, but it's okay. And it's, again, you're looking for validation. You're looking for, go back to within you.
Yeah.
You give yourself validation that these things did happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, tell yourself you are sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That whole process of, that's the whole process of grieving. How do you come
Mm-hmm.
back to yourself? And it's very hard. Sometimes these words are just words, but how
Yeah.
do you get yourself out of it? It's like the deeper and deeper you go into grief, you can go into like real deep depression, insomnia, really um, lonely self. Like, you kind of put yourself in this small bubble or a small corner, you go and hide.
Mm-hmm.
But allow yourself to be open and seek help.
Yeah.
And really, but some of these relationships are for some people, have been hard.
Yeah.
And that person dies, and or you cared for them, and or they've said some not so kind words before they
Mm-hmm.
left.
Yeah.
That has put a hole in your heart.
Mm.
um, and you don't know how to process. It's like, again, what others tell you in their um, deep moment of fear when they're passing, transitioning, is not the truth, and that's not how they feel about you. Um, Not taking it personally, and just validating yourself. It's okay.
Mm.
You know?
I love that. Somebody needed to hear that. I know that message was for somebody. I can feel it in my bones. How
Yeah.
beautiful. But the key is understanding that we are source and that we're not humans. We are source. If we want to be able to navigate death and grief gracefully, it's by anchoring into the knowing
Yeah.
that we are unlimited, that we are source,
Yeah.
we are soul, and that that is infinite. Period.
Taking a deep breath, one breath at a time, because I just had my birthday, and you do have anxiety sometimes, like, oh my God, I'm getting closer. How many years do I have? And it's okay. It's like, I think more anxiety is, I have so much left to do,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing enough. But then this song that I listen to, the prayer that I listen to, and it talks about that you come from this infinite space.
Hmm.
You come from love. You are in that infinite space and that love space, and you're going to merge into the same space.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's nothing is different. So
Yeah.
be that enough. Everything is enough. You've done enough. You're doing enough, and you're going to continue doing enough, and you are enough.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, this conversation has been magnificent. Frankly, I feel like there's definitely the possibility and will be the desire to maybe have you back again and have another conversation around some of this stuff because this has been so fun. But in the meantime, please tell people where they can find you. Please tell them a little bit about your book and what maybe the intention is for that so they can know if that's the right kind of thing for them. Give us all your information.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've written chapters in few books, but this one I had the honor to lead this book. I have 25 authors, including myself. So every chapter gives you the story of their experience that they've had with their loved one passing, and then the opportunity that they have taken, and how they've shifted their life. And then there's a tool underneath where it gives you maybe meditation. It tells you about um, processing grief. It tells you different things it talks about, and different perspective from all over the world, because
Mm.
again, we are different people, and I have somebody from India, somebody from Australia and New Zealand, someone with the Hawaiian view, someone with view from more Toltec. And so it's like different viewpoint about death and dying and
Wow.
life and living and forgiveness.
Yeah.
uh, I Me and one of the author from this book, also my colleague from End of Life Doula course, we host a Death Cafe every other Thursday online.
Mm.
It's virtual. So you can email me, himalivora1@gmail.com, for more information if you need. Or you can go to deathcafe.com, and they'll have different in-person and virtual um, death cafes. What else? Yeah,
The
and
name of the book for anybody who's not watching on video is Sacred Death, and we will put the link to that book in the show notes so you can find your way to it very quickly.
it's Sacred Death, 25 tools for caregivers.
Mm.
Yeah.
And if people, I don't know if you have this available right now, if people did want to work with you, whether it was for sessions and some of the modalities that you had, or maybe even some of your death doula work, where should they go to get connected with you?
Um, they can email me, himalivora1@gmail.com.
Yeah, we'll put your email probably in the show notes. So send her a message if you would like to inquire on any of her services. Check out her book. And again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining for this episode. This has been so much fun.
So much. I really appreciate it. And I had great time talking with
Yay. And thank you to everybody who's listening. And we will be back next Monday for more breakthroughs. Bye, everyone.
you.